Hello there, and welcome back. Tonight we drift into shadows where answers hide just beyond our reach. These are the puzzles that keep scientists awake, the riddles whispered across laboratories and observatories, the questions that make us wonder if we will ever truly understand everything around us. As you settle into comfort tonight, let your mind wander through these unsolved riddles. There is no pressure to remember every detail, no test waiting at the end. This is simply an invitation to drift, to wonder, to feel the gentle pull of curiosity without needing to grasp all the answers. Science at its best is not about certainty. It is about the courage to admit what we do not know. If you enjoy these journeys into the unexplained, feel free to like and subscribe. It helps others find their way here too. But for now, just breathe deeply, let your body sink into stillness, and allow these mysteries to carry you wherever they wish to go. And if you are ready, let us begin. Fact 1. Nobody can explain why identical twins sometimes develop completely different personalities despite sharing the exact same genetic blueprint. Two children born from one fertilized egg, raised in the same home, eating the same food, experiencing the same parents, can grow into adults who think, feel, and behave in utterly opposite ways. One might become adventurous, while the other grows cautious. One might love solitude while the other craves crowds. Scientists study twins hoping to separate nature from nurture, to understand which traits come from genes and which emerge from environment. Yet the deeper they look, the more mysterious the question becomes. Even twins separated at birth and reunited decades later sometimes share eerie similarities, wearing similar clothes, choosing similar careers, even naming their pets identical names. Other times, no connection appears at all. What invisible forces shape who we become? Why should two people with matching DNA walk such different paths through life? The answer remains hidden somewhere between biology and experience, waiting for us to understand. Fact 2. The placebo effect can sometimes work even when patients know they are taking fake medicine, and this defies everything we thought we understood about belief in healing. Imagine being handed a sugar pill while being told clearly that it contains no active ingredients whatsoever. Logic says it should do nothing, yet studies show that some people still feel better, their pain decreasing, their symptoms easing, even though they fully understand no real drug entered their body. How can this be? One possibility is that the ritual itself carries power. The act of swallowing something, the presence of a doctor, the expectation of a healing process, all combine to trigger genuine biological changes. Another idea suggests that our brains possess hidden pathways for self-repair, switches that flip on simply because we go through motions associated with getting well. Whatever the mechanism, it challenges our assumptions about mind and body being separate. It suggests consciousness reaches deeper into our physical selves than we ever imagined, capable of healing in ways that seem almost magical. Fact 3. Strange metallic spheres have been found buried in ancient rock layers millions of years old, and their origin makes no sense according to everything we know about geology. These spheres, discovered in places like South Africa, are nearly perfect in shape, sometimes grooved with parallel lines around their equator. The rock surrounding them dates back roughly 3 billion years, long before any humans walked the planet, long before any civilization could have carved or forged metal. Some scientists argue these must be natural formations, perhaps created by mineral deposits, that somehow crystallized into round shapes over immense spans of time. Others remain baffled because the precision seems too exact, too deliberate. How does nature create something that looks manufactured? Could there be geological processes we have not yet discovered, forces that mold stone and metal into eerily artificial-looking forms? Or do these spheres point towards something stranger? Evidence of patterns in Earth's deep past that we have completely misunderstood. The spheres sit in museums now, silent witnesses to a puzzle geologists still cannot solve. Fact 4. Certain people can hear sounds that nobody else detects, like a hum that seems to come from nowhere, and scientists still debate whether it is real or imagined. This phenomenon, often called the hum, has been reported in locations around the globe. People describe it as a low, persistent drone, like a distant engine running constantly. It keeps some awake at night. It drives others to move away from their homes searching for silence. Researchers have tried to record the sound using sensitive equipment, and sometimes they capture something, a faint vibration in a specific frequency range. Other times, instruments detect nothing at all. Theories range from industrial noise travelling through ground or air in unusual ways, to natural geological activity, to psychological conditions where the brain generates phantom sounds. What makes the hum especially mysterious is its selectivity. In a room full of people, only one or two might hear it. Why should ears differ so dramatically in what they perceive? Until we identify the source, the hum remains a haunting mystery for those who experience it. Fact 5. Lightning sometimes strikes upward from the ground into clouds instead of downward, and the conditions that cause this reversal are still not fully understood. Most lightning bolts follow the familiar pattern. Charge builds in storm clouds, then a jagged streak plunges earthward, illuminating the sky for a fraction of a second. But occasionally, observers witness lightning moving the opposite direction, rising from tall structures, mountains, or even flat ground, reaching upward into the atmosphere above. These upward strikes often happen during particularly intense storms. They seem to occur when the electric field between ground and sky reaches extreme levels, flipping the usual flow of current. Scientists can measure and photograph them, but predicting exactly when and where they will appear remains difficult. What triggers the reversal? Why do some storms produce dozens of upward strikes while others produce none? The answers touch on complex atmospheric physics, on how charge distributes itself through thunderclouds, on subtle variations in terrain and weather that shift invisible electrical gradients. Lightning, something humans have watched for millennia, still holds secrets we have not fully grasped. Fact 6. Certain ancient structures align perfectly with astronomical events, yet the builders left no written records explaining how they achieved such precision. Stonehenge in England marks the summer solstice sunrise. The pyramids of Giza align with startling accuracy to cardinal directions. Temples in Central America track Venus across the sky. These are not accidents. The mathematics involved require careful observation over years, understanding of celestial cycles, and engineering skill to translate knowledge into stone. Yet the people who built these monuments lived long before modern astronomy, before telescopes, before written equations. How did they measure the heavens so precisely? Did they use tools that have since vanished? Did they possess oral traditions for passing astronomical knowledge through generations? Or were they simply more patient observers than we give them credit for, watching the sky night after night, season after season, until patterns became clear? The stones themselves remain, silent teachers of a lost wisdom we are still learning to appreciate. Fact 7. Glass can flow like liquid over extremely long periods, but whether this actually happens in old windows is still hotly debated among physicists. You may have heard the claim that ancient cathedral windows are thicker at the bottom because glass slowly drips downward over centuries. This idea suggests glass is not truly solid, but rather a supercooled liquid that never quite freezes completely. The truth is more complicated. Glass does have unusual properties. Its molecules are frozen in a disordered state, unlike the neat arrangements in crystals. Some physicists argue that given enough time, perhaps millions of years, glass might indeed flow. Others insist that any thickness variations in old windows simply reflect imperfect manufacturing techniques from centuries past, when glassmakers could not produce perfectly uniform panes. Experiments show that glass at room temperature would take longer than the age of the universe to flow noticeably. Yet the question lingers because glass sits at a strange boundary between solid and liquid, a material that defies easy categorization. Fact 8. The center of the Milky Way galaxy emits mysterious bursts of gamma rays that appear and vanish without warning, and their source remains unknown. Our galaxy's heart is a violent place. A supermassive black hole lurks there, surrounded by swirling gas, dense star clusters, and powerful magnetic fields. Occasionally, telescopes detect sudden flashes of gamma rays, the most energetic form of light, erupting from this region. These bursts last anywhere from hours to days, then disappear as mysteriously as they arrived. What causes them? One possibility is that matter falling into the black hole sometimes releases energy in unpredictable bursts. Another idea involves collisions between cosmic rays and gas clouds near the galactic center. Some astronomers even speculate about exotic physics, particles or processes we have not yet discovered. The challenge is that the galactic center lies roughly 26,000 light-years away, hidden behind thick clouds of dust that block visible light. We must rely on gamma-ray telescopes and radio observations, piecing together clues from radiation that travels across vast distances. The heart of our own galaxy remains partly mysterious, even as we gaze outward to explore others. Fact 9. Some materials become superconductors, carrying electricity without any resistance, but only at extremely cold temperatures, and nobody fully understands why. Imagine a wire where electrical current flows perfectly, losing no energy to heat, continuing forever once started. This is superconductivity, discovered over a century ago. Cool certain metals like mercury or lead down near absolute zero, and their resistance vanishes completely. Electrons pair up and move through the material as if gliding on ice, encountering no friction whatsoever. Scientists have built theories explaining how this happens in simple materials, involving quantum mechanics and electron interactions. But then high-temperature superconductors were discovered, materials that become superconducting at warmer temperatures, though still far below freezing. These do not fit the old theories. Their behavior suggests new physics is at work, mechanisms we have not yet identified. If we could understand high-temperature superconductivity completely, it might lead to revolutionary technologies, perfectly efficient power grids, faster computers, levitating trains that glide without friction. For now, the mystery keeps researchers searching, experimenting with new materials, hoping to unlock the secret. Fact 10. Certain deep-sea creatures glow with bioluminescence, creating light through chemical reactions, but the evolutionary advantage of this ability in total darkness puzzles biologists. In the deepest parts of the ocean, where sunlight never reaches, many animals produce their own light. They glow blue, green, or red, using specialized organs filled with chemicals that react to create a cold, ghostly illumination. Some use their light to attract prey, dangling glowing lures in front of their mouths. Others flash patterns to communicate, with mates or confuse predators. But here is the puzzle. Bioluminescence requires energy, and food in the deep ocean is scarce. Why invest precious resources into making light when everything around you already lives in darkness? Would not other senses, like smell or vibration detection, be more efficient? Researchers suggest that even in near-total darkness, faint traces of bioluminescence from other creatures create a dim environment where glowing offers advantages. Or perhaps bioluminescence serves multiple purposes we have not yet discovered. The deep ocean remains one of the least explored environments on Earth, a realm where light itself becomes a mystery. Fact 11. Rogue waves appear suddenly in the open ocean, towering walls of water that seem to come from nowhere, and predicting them remains nearly impossible. Sailors have told stories for centuries about enormous waves rising out of calm seas, waves tall enough to swallow ships whole. For a long time, scientists dismissed these as myths or exaggerations. Then satellites and instruments on oil platforms began recording them. Rogue waves are real, sometimes reaching heights of 20 meters or more, appearing without warning in weather that seems relatively normal. What causes them? One theory suggests that waves traveling in different directions can temporarily combine, their energies merging to create a single giant surge that dissipates moments later. Another idea involves ocean currents focusing wave energy into narrow corridors where monsters can form. Despite progress in understanding, rogue waves remain unpredictable. Ships still encounter them by surprise, with little time to react. The ocean, vast and powerful, keeps reminding us that its moods and movements are not yet fully mapped. Fact 12. Some plants can communicate with each other through underground fungal networks, sharing nutrients, and even warning signals, but how they coordinate this remains poorly understood. Beneath every forest floor lies a hidden web, fungal threads connecting tree roots in vast underground networks. Scientists call this the wood wide web. Through these connections, trees can transfer sugars, nitrogen, and other nutrients to one another. A large, healthy tree might send resources to a smaller, struggling neighbour. When one tree is attacked by insects, it can send chemical signals through the network, alerting others to produce defensive compounds before the pests arrive. How do plants, lacking brains or nervous systems, manage such complex communication? How do they decide which neighbours to help? Does the fungus itself play an active role, directing traffic like a biological internet? Research is only beginning to reveal the sophistication of these networks. Forests are not just collections of individual trees, but communities linked beneath the soil in ways we're only starting to appreciate. Fact 13. Certain rocks found in deserts move across the ground by themselves, leaving long trails behind them, and for decades nobody could explain how. In places like Death Valley, California, researchers found heavy stones scattered across dry lake beds, each trailed by a track showing it had somehow slid across the cracked mud. Some trails stretched hundreds of meters. No human footprints appeared nearby. No obvious mechanism seemed capable of moving such weight. Theories ranged from strong winds to magnetic fields to pranksters, but none fit all the evidence. Finally, in 2014, scientists set up cameras and GPS trackers. They discovered the answer. On rare winter mornings, thin sheets of ice form on the lake bed overnight. As temperatures rise, the ice begins to melt and break into large floating panels. Gentle winds push these ice sheets, which in turn nudge the rocks embedded in them, sliding them slowly across the slick mud. By afternoon, the ice has melted away completely, leaving only the mysterious trails. What appeared supernatural turned out to be a delicate combination of weather, timing, and physics, occurring so rarely that it took decades to witness. Fact 14. The human appendix was long considered useless, but recent evidence suggests it might play a role in immune function, and its true purpose is still debated. For generations, doctors taught that the appendix was a vestigial organ, a leftover from evolutionary ancestors who needed it to digest plant matter, now serving no function in modern humans. Removing it seemed to cause no harm, reinforcing the idea that it was merely biological baggage. But newer research paints a different picture. The appendix contains dense concentrations of immune tissue. It might serve as a reservoir for beneficial gut bacteria, a safe house where helpful microbes hide during illness, ready to repopulate the intestines after disease wipes them out. This could explain why the appendix sits at a junction in the digestive system, positioned to release bacteria downstream when needed. Not everyone agrees. Some scientists still argue the evidence is weak, that the appendix might have minor functions but remains largely unnecessary. The debate continues, reminding us that even our own bodies hold secrets we have not fully uncovered. Fact 15. Ball lightning has been reported for centuries, glowing spheres that float through the air during storms, yet scientists have only recently begun to capture evidence of its existence. Witnesses describe orbs of light, sometimes the size of a basketball, drifting through rooms, passing through walls, hovering silently before vanishing in a flash or fading slowly away. For a long time, these accounts were dismissed as hallucinations or misidentified ordinary lightning, but enough credible reports accumulated, including sightings by pilots, scientists, and large groups of people, that researchers began taking the phenomenon seriously. In recent years, a few laboratory experiments have managed to create something resembling ball lightning using high-voltage electrical discharges. The results suggest it might involve plasma, ionized gas held together by electromagnetic fields in ways that remain unclear. Natural ball lightning, however, remains rare and unpredictable. We have only a handful of photographs and videos, most too brief or unclear to analyze fully. Until we can study it systematically, ball lightning remains one of nature's most elusive mysteries. Fact 16. The WOW signal, a powerful radio transmission detected in 1977 from deep space, has never been explained or detected again. On August 15, 1977, a radio telescope in Ohio picked up a signal unlike anything astronomers had seen before. It lasted 72 seconds, far stronger than background noise, and came from a specific direction in the constellation Sagittarius. A researcher reviewing the data later circled it and wrote "Wow" in the margin, giving the signal its name. The signal matched what scientists expected from an artificial transmission, narrow in frequency, intense and brief. Yet it never repeated. Observers pointed telescopes at the same spot many times afterward, finding nothing. Was it a natural phenomenon we do not yet understand? A passing comet releasing unusual radiation? Or could it have been a deliberate signal from an intelligent source, transmitted once and never again? Without repetition, we cannot analyze it further. The wow signal remains one of the most intriguing candidates for extraterrestrial contact. A single mysterious whisper from the cosmos that has never spoken again. Fact 17. Certain ancient texts describe technologies and flying machines that sound impossible for their time, and historians still debate whether these are myths or lost knowledge. In Sanskrit epics from India, stories tell of vimanas, flying chariots that soar through the skies, powered by mysterious forces. Chinese texts describe inventors creating flying devices and early robots. Most scholars interpret these as mythology, imaginative stories reflecting human dreams of flight and power. But occasionally, descriptions contain technical details that seem oddly specific, as if the writers had witnessed something real. Some researchers wonder if ancient civilizations achieved technological advances that were later forgotten, lost during wars, plagues, or the collapse of empires. Others argue this gives ancient people too little credit for imagination and too much credit for engineering. The debate touches on larger questions about how we view history. Do we assume progress always moves forward? Or could knowledge rise and fall, leaving only myths behind? Fact 18. Certain frequencies of sound can make people feel uneasy, or even see things that are not there, and the effects of infrasound on human perception are still being explored. Infrasound refers to sound waves below the range of human hearing, typically below 20 Hz. We cannot consciously hear these frequencies, yet they can affect us. Studies show that exposure to infrasound can cause feelings of anxiety, dread, or being watched. Some people report seeing shadowy figures or movements in their peripheral vision when exposed to certain low frequencies. One famous example involved a laboratory where workers kept reporting ghost sightings. Investigators discovered that a ventilation fan was producing infrasound at a frequency that resonated with the human eyeball, causing slight vibrations that created visual distortions. Infrasound occurs naturally in storms, earthquakes, and ocean waves. It also comes from human sources like engines and machinery. Could some supposedly haunted locations simply have environmental factors producing infrasound? The idea that sound we cannot hear can influence what we see and feel opens strange questions about perception and reality. Fact 19. The Great Attractor is a gravitational anomaly pulling our galaxy and thousands of others toward it. Yet we cannot see what it is because it lies behind the plane of the Milky Way. Astronomers measuring the motion of galaxies discovered something odd. Our galaxy, along with many others in the local universe, is moving in a particular direction at high speed, as if drawn by an immense gravitational pull. The source, dubbed the Great Attractor, lies roughly 150 million light-years away in the direction of the constellation Centaurus. But thick clouds of gas and dust in the Milky Way block our view, creating a zone of avoidance where optical telescopes cannot see. Radio and X-ray observations have revealed that the Great Attractor region contains enormous galaxy clusters with vast amounts of mass. Yet the details remain unclear. Is it a single massive structure or a collection of clusters? Could there be something even larger beyond it? The Great Attractor reminds us that even in an age of powerful telescopes, parts of the universe remain hidden simply because of where we sit within our own galaxy. Fact 20. Certain materials exhibit negative refraction, bending light in directions that defy normal optics, and this property could lead to technologies like invisibility cloaks. When light passes from air into water, it bends at the boundary, a phenomenon called refraction. This bending always occurs in predictable directions based on the materials involved, but scientists have created metamaterials, artificial structures engineered at tiny scales, that bend light the wrong way. Instead of refracting normally, these materials redirect light along paths that seem impossible. This negative refraction opens possibilities that sound like science fiction. If you could bend light around an object so that it flows smoothly past without interacting, the object would become invisible. Researchers have demonstrated simple versions of this with microwaves and specific wavelengths of light. cloaking small objects from detection. Scaling this up to hide larger objects in visible light remains a huge challenge. Metamaterials are difficult to manufacture, and perfect invisibility would require controlling light from all angles and frequencies simultaneously. Still, the fact that we can bend light in seemingly impossible ways suggests the boundaries of optics are not as fixed as we once believed. Fact 21. Certain deep caves contain bacteria that have been isolated from the surface world for millions of years, and their unique biology challenges our understanding of evolution. In caves sealed off from sunlight and surface nutrients, scientists have discovered microbial ecosystems that survive on chemistry alone. These bacteria feed on minerals, sulfur compounds, and chemical reactions in the rock, living in total darkness for countless generations. Some of these microbes are genetically distinct from anything found on the surface, evolving in isolation for so long that they represent entirely separate branches of the tree of life. What makes them especially intriguing is their resilience. Some can survive extreme conditions, high radiation, intense pressure, toxic chemicals. Studying them offers clues about how life might exist in harsh environments elsewhere in the universe, perhaps deep beneath the ice of Europa or in the dry soils of Mars. These cave bacteria also challenge assumptions about evolution. Isolated from the rest of the biosphere, they evolved solutions to survival that differ dramatically from surface life. Their existence reminds us that life is more adaptable, more varied, and more mysterious than we ever imagined. Fact 22. The placebo effect has a dark twin called the nocebo effect, where expecting harm can actually cause real symptoms, and this phenomenon reveals unsettling truths about the power of belief. If you take a fake pill believing it will make you sick, you might actually feel nauseous, develop headaches, or experience pain, even though the pill contains no active ingredients. This is the nocebo effect. Studies show that when doctors warn patients about potential side effects, those patients are more likely to experience those exact symptoms, even when taking placebos. The mind, anticipating harm, seems to create the very harm it fears. This raises troubling questions. How much of the discomfort we feel from real medications comes from expectation rather than chemistry? If negative beliefs can make us sick, what does this say about the relationship between mind and body? Some researchers worry that informed consent, where doctors must tell patients about every possible side effect, might inadvertently cause more suffering. Others argue that knowledge is always better than ignorance, even if it carries risks. The nocebo effect is a reminder that our expectations shape our reality in profound ways. Fact 23. Certain species of jellyfish appear to be biologically immortal, capable of reverting to earlier life stages and beginning their life cycle again, and this process defies everything we know about aging. Most organisms age and die. Cells accumulate damage over time, systems break down, and eventually life ends. But the jellyfish Turritopsis dohrnii can do something astonishing. When stressed, injured, or simply old, it can transform its adult body back into a juvenile polyp stage, essentially rewinding its biological clock. From this polyp, it grows into an adult again, potentially repeating the cycle indefinitely. Scientists call this transdifferentiation, where specialized cells revert to a more primitive state, and then develop into new types of cells. Imagine if a butterfly could turn back into a caterpillar, or if an elderly human could somehow become a child again. The jellyfish does not do this to extend its individual life, but rather to reset itself when conditions become unfavorable. It suggests that aging might not be inevitable, but rather a program that, under the right circumstances, can be reversed. Studying these jellyfish could unlock secrets about cellular aging that apply to many species, including our own. Fact 24. Some quantum particles seem to communicate instantaneously across any distance, suggesting the universe might be fundamentally connected in ways we do not understand. When two particles become entangled, measuring one immediately affects the other, no matter how far apart they are. This happens faster than light could travel between them, which should be impossible according to relativity. Einstein called this spooky action at a distance, because it seemed to violate the principle that nothing can travel faster than light. Yet experiments confirm it happens. So how do the particles coordinate? One interpretation suggests that entangled particles are not truly separate. At a deeper level of reality, they remain connected as parts of a single system. Distance, in this view, is only an illusion created by our limited perspective. Another idea is that information about the measurement does not actually travel between particles. Instead, the act of measurement reveals a correlation that was always there, hidden until observed. Neither explanation is entirely satisfying. Quantum entanglement forces us to question basic assumptions about space, time, and the independence of objects. It hints that the universe is woven together in ways our everyday experience does not prepare us to comprehend. Fact 25. The origin of Earth's moon is still debated, with the leading theory suggesting a Mars-sized object collided with early Earth, yet many details do not quite fit. According to the giant impact hypothesis, roughly 4.5 billion years ago, a protoplanet called Theia struck Earth with tremendous force. The collision vaporized both objects' outer layers, sending debris into orbit. This debris gradually coalesced into the moon. The theory explains many things: why the moon is so large compared to Earth, why it is made of similar material, and why it lacks a significant iron core. But problems remain. The moon's composition matches Earth's mantle almost perfectly, more closely than the impact theory predicts. If Theia contributed material, the moon should show chemical differences. Some scientists propose that the collision mixed material so thoroughly that signatures of Theia were erased. Others suggest multiple smaller impacts rather than one giant one. Still others wonder if Theia and Earth formed from the same region of the solar system, making them chemically identical from the start. Without travelling back in time or finding remnants of Theia elsewhere, we may never know the full story. The moon, our closest celestial companion, still guards secrets about its violent birth. Fact 26. Some people can taste sounds or see music as colours, experiencing the world through blended senses in a condition called synesthesia. Yet neuroscience cannot fully explain how this happens. Imagine hearing a violin and simultaneously seeing purple waves flowing through the air, or tasting chocolate whenever you hear someone speak your name. For individuals with synesthesia, sensory experiences automatically trigger responses in completely different sensory systems. The condition runs in families, suggesting genetic components, but brain scans reveal that synesthetes process information differently than others. Their neural pathways seem more interconnected, allowing signals from one sense to spill into another. What remains mysterious is why this occurs and what it reveals about normal perception. Do all human brains have these connections lying dormant? Could everyone potentially experience this rich, layered reality if the right switch is flipped? Some researchers believe synesthesia offers glimpses into how the brain constructs reality, showing us that the boundary between senses is more fluid than we assume. Fact 27. Ancient amber sometimes preserves creatures with features that do not match any known species, leaving paleontologists puzzling over evolutionary branches that vanished without descendants. Amber forms when tree resin hardens over millions of years, occasionally trapping insects, spiders, or small animals in perfect preservation. Scientists examining these specimens sometimes discover organisms with bizarre characteristics, body plans that seem experimental, combinations of features that appear nowhere in the modern world. A creature might have the wings of one insect group but the mouth parts of another, suggesting evolutionary experiments that ultimately failed. These amber fossils reveal that the history of life contains countless dead ends, lineages that thrived briefly before extinction erased them. What factors determined which species survived and which disappeared? Why did certain body designs flourish while others, seemingly just as functional, vanished completely? Each amber specimen is a window into lost possibilities, reminding us that evolution's path could have taken countless different directions. Fact 28. Certain lakes around the world occasionally turn blood red overnight without warning, and while scientists have identified some causes, others remain unexplained. When a lake suddenly shifts from blue or green to deep crimson, panic often follows. Ancient texts describe such events as omens or curses. Modern science offers more prosaic explanations. Algae blooms, particularly species that produce red pigments, can multiply rapidly under specific conditions, turning vast bodies of water the colour of rust or wine. But not all red lakes fit this pattern. Some turn red in winter when algae should be dormant. Others show no trace of the organisms typically responsible. Chemical analysis sometimes reveals unusual mineral concentrations or underground volcanic activity, releasing iron-rich water, yet cases remain where no satisfactory explanation emerges. The water turns red, persists for days or weeks, then clears again, leaving behind only photographs and bewildered witnesses. These crimson lakes remind us that even familiar landscapes can transform in ways that defy immediate understanding. Fact 29. Fireflies synchronize their flashing across entire forests, blinking in perfect unison, and the mechanisms allowing thousands of insects to coordinate without a leader puzzle biologists. In certain regions of Southeast Asia and the Americas, fireflies gather in trees at night, and instead of flashing randomly, they begin to pulse together, creating waves of light that sweep through the darkness in coordinated patterns. No single firefly directs this display. There is no conductor, no signal travelling from one insect to others. Instead, each firefly adjusts its rhythm based on the flashes it sees around it, gradually synchronizing with its neighbours through simple rules repeated thousands of times. This phenomenon, called emergent behaviour, fascinates scientists because it shows how complexity can arise from simplicity. Yet many questions remain. Why do some firefly species synchronize while others never do? What evolutionary advantage does coordinated flashing provide? Does it help attract mates more effectively, or does it confuse predators? The forests glow with synchronized light, but the full story behind this natural symphony remains incomplete. Fact 30. A mysterious fog sometimes appears in valleys with no apparent source, rising even on clear days when weather conditions should make such formations impossible. Fog typically forms when warm, moist air cools, causing water vapour to condense into tiny droplets. But residents of certain valleys report fog that behaves strangely, appearing suddenly without temperature changes, rising from the ground in thick blankets even when the air is dry and warm. Meteorologists visiting these locations find themselves puzzled. Standard weather models cannot account for the fog's appearance. Some theories suggest underground water sources might release vapour through soil, creating localized humid zones invisible to standard measurements. Others propose that unique topography channels air in unexpected ways, creating microclimates that defy broader weather patterns. Still others wonder if electromagnetic fields or unknown geological factors play roles. The fog comes and goes according to its own schedule, seemingly ignoring the rules that govern weather elsewhere. Locals grow accustomed to it, giving the fog names and attributing personalities to its movements, while scientists continue searching for mechanisms that remain hidden. Fact 31. Certain mathematical constants appear repeatedly throughout nature, in seemingly unrelated contexts, suggesting hidden patterns that connect the universe in ways we do not comprehend. The number pi shows up not just in circles, but in probability, quantum mechanics, and the distribution of prime numbers. The golden ratio appears in flower petals, spiral galaxies, and the proportions of the human body. Euler's number governs compound growth, radioactive decay, and the behavior of waves. Why should abstract numbers discovered through pure mathematics correspond so precisely to physical reality? Some thinkers argue that mathematics is the language the universe speaks, that these constants represent fundamental truths woven into existence itself. Others suggest humans naturally notice patterns and might be seeing connections where none truly exist. Yet the precision is undeniable. These numbers arise again and again, in fields ranging from biology to astronomy, as if reality contains a hidden code waiting to be fully deciphered. Fact 32. The interior of Neptune radiates more heat than it receives from the Sun, implying an unknown energy source deep within the planet. When scientists measure the temperature of Neptune's atmosphere and compare it to the amount of sunlight reaching the planet, the numbers do not balance. Neptune should be frozen solid, a lifeless ice ball at the edge of the solar system. Instead, it glows with internal warmth, producing roughly twice as much energy as it absorbs from the distant Sun. What generates this heat? One possibility involves gravitational compression, with the planet's immense weight squeezing its interior and converting pressure into warmth. Another idea suggests that helium and other materials are raining slowly toward Neptune's core, releasing energy through friction as they descend. Some scientists even speculate about exotic chemical reactions or phase transitions in the planet's deep layers. Without direct access to Neptune's interior, we rely on models and indirect measurements. The ice giant keeps its furnace hidden, warming itself through processes we can only guess at. Fact 33. Crop circles appear overnight in fields with intricate geometric patterns, and while many are proven hoaxes, some display characteristics that remain difficult to explain through simple human creation. When morning light reveals massive designs pressed into wheat or barley, perfectly formed and sometimes hundreds of feet across, questions inevitably arise. Most crop circles result from people with boards and ropes creating art in darkness, but researchers examining certain formations find anomalies. Plant stems bent but not broken, cellular changes in the crops, unusual magnetic readings in the soil. Some formations appear in locations where human access seems nearly impossible without leaving traces. Skeptics argue that clever hoaxers can produce all these effects with enough skill and planning. Believers point to cases where no satisfactory mundane explanation fits. The truth likely involves a spectrum. Many circles are deliberate art projects. Some are misidentified natural phenomena like wind damage, and perhaps a few remain genuinely mysterious. The fields keep producing new patterns each year, and the debate continues. Fact 34. Glaciers sometimes emit strange groaning sounds that resemble human voices or musical tones, and the acoustic properties creating these noises are not fully understood. People exploring glaciers describe unsettling experiences, hearing what sounds like singing, moaning, or whispered conversations emanating from deep within the ice. Recordings capture these sounds, confirming they are real rather than hallucinations. Scientists believe the noises result from ice cracking, shifting, and melting under pressure. As glaciers move, internal stresses build until ice suddenly fractures, releasing energy as sound waves. The shape of crevasses and ice tunnels might amplify these sounds, creating resonances that sound eerily musical or voice-like. But the exact mechanisms remain unclear. Why do some glaciers produce these sounds while others remain silent? Do temperature fluctuations, ice composition, or underlying bedrock play roles? Glaciers are not static. They breathe and groan, singing songs in frequencies that unsettle anyone who listens closely enough to hear. Fact 35. The human body occasionally produces small amounts of alcohol internally without consuming any beverages, and in rare cases this autobrewery syndrome can cause intoxication. Most people metabolize sugars and carbohydrates normally, breaking them down into energy. But in individuals with autobrewery syndrome, an overgrowth of certain yeasts or bacteria in the gut ferments these sugars into ethanol. The alcohol enters the bloodstream, causing symptoms of drunkenness even though the person has consumed no drinks whatsoever. Victims report feeling dizzy, confused, or disoriented after eating bread or fruit. Breathalyzer tests show elevated alcohol levels that are medically baffling until the underlying condition is discovered. What causes this yeast overgrowth? Antibiotic use, dietary changes, or genetic factors might contribute, but clear triggers remain elusive. The condition is rare enough that many doctors do not immediately recognize it, sometimes leading to accusations of secret drinking. Autobrewery syndrome reveals how dependent we are on the balance of microorganisms living inside us, a partnership that can occasionally malfunction in bizarre ways. Fact 36. Some caves. 6. Some contain formations that seem to defy gravity, with stalactites growing sideways or upward instead of hanging downward as expected. Stalactites normally form as mineral-rich water drips from cave ceilings, depositing layers of calcite that slowly build downward like stone icicles. But in certain caverns, formations jut horizontally from walls, or even curve upward toward the ceiling. How is this possible? One explanation involves strong air currents within the cave system. Moving air can deflect falling water droplets, or cause minerals to deposit in unusual directions. Another theory points to changes in cave orientation over geological time. A formation that began growing downward might end up horizontal if tectonic forces tilted the entire cave. Some formations might result from water flowing along walls rather than dripping, creating structures that follow the rock surface regardless of gravity. Each cave is unique, shaped by its particular combination of water flow, air movement, and geological history. These gravity-defying formations remind us that even processes as simple as dripping water can create surprises when given enough time. Fact 37. Certain species of ants cultivate fungus gardens underground, farming their food in sophisticated agricultural systems that evolved millions of years before humans invented farming. Leafcutter ants do not eat the leaves they harvest. Instead, they chew vegetation into pulp and use it as compost to grow specific species of fungus. The ants tend these gardens carefully, removing contaminating fungi, regulating humidity, and harvesting the nutritious fungal growths to feed their colonies. This relationship is so ancient that the ants and their fungal crops have co-evolved, becoming dependent on each other for survival. The fungus no longer reproduces sexually in nature. It exists only in ant colonies, propagated when new queens carry fungal samples to start fresh gardens. What makes this even more remarkable is that the ants also cultivate bacteria on their bodies that produce antibiotics, helping control diseases in their gardens. This three-way partnership involving ants, fungi, and bacteria represents a level of agricultural sophistication that challenges our assumptions about intelligence and planning. How did such complexity evolve without consciousness or foresight? Fact 38. Glass beads have been found scattered across deserts in locations far from any volcanoes or impact craters, and their formation remains unexplained. These small, smooth spheres of glass, sometimes called tektites, appear in concentrated fields in remote areas. Their composition suggests they formed through extremely high temperatures, hot enough to melt rock and fling it through the air. Impact craters from meteorites can create such conditions, and indeed some tektite fields lie near known impact sites. But others sit in regions where no crater has been found. Could ancient impacts have occurred but left no trace? Might atmospheric explosions from meteors that burst before striking the ground create enough heat? Some researchers propose that lightning strikes, under very rare conditions, might generate localized temperatures extreme enough to produce glass. Others wonder about undiscovered geological processes. The beads themselves offer few clues beyond their glassy composition. They lie scattered on the sand, silent witnesses to violent events whose nature remains hidden in the deep past. Fact 39. The boundary between waking and sleeping is not as clear as we assume, with some people experiencing states where they are partially awake and partially dreaming simultaneously. Sleep paralysis is one such state. Victims wake to find themselves conscious but unable to move, sometimes experiencing vivid hallucinations of figures standing in their room or pressure on their chest. This happens because the brain mechanisms that prevent movement during dreams do not fully disengage as consciousness returns. Another phenomenon involves lucid dreaming, where people become aware they are dreaming and can sometimes control the dream content. These states suggest that consciousness is not binary, not simply on or off, but exists along a spectrum with many gradations. Brain imaging studies show that different regions activate or deactivate at different rates during sleep transitions, creating hybrid states where parts of the brain are awake while others remain asleep. What we call waking consciousness might be less unified than we imagine, a coalition of processes that sometimes fall out of sync, revealing the seams in our experience. Fact 40. Certain deserts contain areas where compasses spin wildly, and navigation instruments fail, creating zones where magnetic fields behave unpredictably. Travelers report entering regions where their compasses point in random directions, sometimes spinning continuously without settling on any bearing. GPS devices experience errors or lose signals entirely. These magnetic anomalies often occur near deposits of iron-rich rocks or volcanic formations, where mineral concentrations create local distortions in Earth's magnetic field. But the strength and unpredictability of some anomalies exceed what geology alone should produce. Could ancient lava flows have frozen unusual magnetic patterns into the rock? Might lightning strikes have magnetized the ground in chaotic ways? Some areas remain inexplicable despite extensive surveying. Pilots learn to avoid these zones, and hikers who enter them sometimes report disorientation that goes beyond mere navigational confusion. The Earth's magnetic field is not uniform. It ripples and twists in response to the planet's hidden interior, creating pockets where our technological tools fail and ancient methods of wayfinding become equally useless. Fact 41. Trees in certain forests grow in spiraling patterns, their trunks twisting like corkscrews, and foresters cannot agree on what causes this unusual growth. Straight trees are the norm, growing efficiently upward toward sunlight. But in scattered locations worldwide, entire groves twist as they grow, their wood fibers spiraling around the trunk. Some theories attribute this to genetic mutations that affect how cells divide and expand. Others point to environmental factors like prevailing winds that might encourage twisted growth for stability. Still others wonder about gravitational or magnetic anomalies in the soil, influencing how trees orient themselves. What makes the mystery deeper is the inconsistency. A twisted grove might sit next to normal forest with no apparent environmental differences. Loggers avoid these trees because the spiral grain makes the wood difficult to mill and prone to splitting. The trees themselves seem healthy, living just as long as their straight counterparts. They simply grow according to a different blueprint, following instructions written in their genes or responding to signals we have not yet learned to detect. Fact 42. The ocean floor contains enormous underwater waterfalls and rivers, with cold, dense water cascading down submerged cliffs in formations larger than any found on land. We think of waterfalls as surface features, water plunging over rock edges into pools below. But beneath the ocean surface, where layers of water with different temperatures and salinities meet, similar dynamics occur. Cold, salty water is denser than warm water above it. When this dense water flows over underwater ridges or continental shelves, it cascades downward in submarine waterfalls that dwarf Niagara or Victoria Falls. These underwater cascades move slowly compared to their surface counterparts, but their volume is staggering, transporting vast amounts of water and nutrients through deep ocean basins. Scientists discovered these features through sonar mapping and deep-sea measurements, revealing a hidden topography of valleys, channels, and cataracts. The abyssal plains we once thought featureless are actually dynamic landscapes shaped by flowing water. These underwater rivers affect ocean circulation, climate patterns, and the distribution of marine life, playing roles in Earth systems that we are only beginning to understand. Fact 43. Certain clouds form at extremely high altitudes in conditions where clouds should not be able to exist, glowing with eerie colours during summer twilight. Noctilucent clouds appear only during summer months at high latitudes, shining silver blue after sunset when the sky is darkened. They float at the edge of space, roughly 80 kilometres above the surface, far higher than any weather clouds. At such altitudes, the air is incredibly thin and cold, with temperatures dropping below -100 degrees Celsius. How can clouds form in these conditions? Scientists believe they consist of ice crystals forming on tiny particles of meteor dust. As countless meteoroids burn up entering the atmosphere, they leave behind microscopic debris that serves as nuclei for ice formation. But many questions remain. Why do these clouds appear more frequently now than a century ago? Does climate change affect their formation? Do they influence atmospheric chemistry? Noctilucent clouds are visible only because they catch sunlight long after ground-level observers are in darkness, glowing like ghostly veils at the boundary between atmosphere and space. They are among the highest clouds in existence, hovering where Earth's atmosphere gradually gives way to the void. Fact 44. The exact number of senses humans possess is debated, with scientists identifying far more than the traditional 5. We learn in school about sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smell, but our bodies detect many other types of information. Proprioception tells us where our limbs are in space without looking. Balance comes from structures in the inner ear that sense orientation and acceleration. We detect temperature through specialized nerve endings. Pain is its own sense, distinct from touch. Internal sensors monitor blood chemistry, stomach fullness, and bladder pressure. Some researchers argue that time itself is a sense, that our brains possess mechanisms for judging duration and rhythm. If we define a sense as any system that detects environmental or internal information and transmits it to the brain, the count expands far beyond 5. This reveals how incomplete our everyday understanding of perception really is. We navigate the world using a rich tapestry of sensory inputs, most operating below conscious awareness, building our experience of reality from far more data streams than we typically acknowledge. Fact 45. Spontaneous human combustion, where individuals reportedly burn to death with no external ignition source, has been documented for centuries, yet forensic science struggles to explain certain cases. Historical records contain accounts of people found reduced to ash in their homes, with minimal damage to surrounding furniture or structures. Skeptics point out that most cases involve elderly individuals, often alone, sometimes intoxicated, sitting near candles or fireplaces. They propose the wick effect, where clothing acts as a wick and body fat as fuel, allowing slow, localized burning once ignition occurs from an external source. This explanation fits many cases, but a few remain troubling. Witnesses report seeing flames erupt from a person's body without any apparent spark. Some victims burned far more completely than typical fire casualties, reduced to fine ash when they should leave more remains. Could unusual combinations of medical conditions, clothing materials, and environmental factors create perfect storms for intense localized burning? Or do these cases reflect gaps in our understanding of how fires behave under specific circumstances? The phenomenon sits at the uncomfortable intersection of folklore and forensic reality. Fact 46. Deep below the ocean surface, researchers have detected mysterious sounds they call the bloop and other unidentified noises that do not match any known marine animal or geological process. In 1997, underwater microphones positioned throughout the Pacific Ocean picked up an extremely powerful, ultra-low frequency sound rising rapidly in frequency over 1 minute before fading away. Scientists nicknamed it the bloop. Its characteristics suggested a living origin, similar to sounds made by marine animals but far louder than any known creature could produce. Later analysis suggested it might have come from an iceberg fracturing or scraping along the seafloor, but certainty remains elusive. Other mysterious sounds have been recorded since. Some repeat periodically. Others appear once and never again. The ocean is vast and largely unexplored. We have better maps of the moon's surface than the seafloor. These sounds remind us that Earth's oceans might harbour phenomena, perhaps even organisms, that we have never encountered. The deep sea keeps its secrets well, speaking occasionally in voices we have not yet learned to understand. Fact 47. Statues and monuments sometimes appear to weep, with liquid seeping from eyes or surfaces, and while most cases have mundane explanations, some defy easy analysis. Reports of weeping statues occur worldwide, often attracting crowds of believers who interpret the phenomenon as miraculous. Scientific investigation typically reveals condensation, water seeping through porous materials, or deliberate hoaxes. Stone and plaster can absorb moisture from the air, releasing it later through natural wicking processes that make drops appear to form and fall like tears. Temperature changes cause expansion and contraction that can force water through tiny cracks. Yet occasionally, investigators find cases where standard explanations do not fit comfortably. The liquid appears in dry conditions. The statue's material should not absorb or release water. Chemical analysis reveals unusual compositions. These edge cases remain controversial. Most scientists insist that unknown mundane causes must be at work, that insufficient investigation leaves room for mystery where none exists. Others remain more cautious, acknowledging that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, but also recognizing that our understanding of material properties and environmental interactions may have gaps. Fact 48. Children sometimes speak about detailed memories of places they have never visited or events before their birth, and while most psychologists attribute this to imagination or misremembered stories, a few cases contain verifiable information that seems difficult to explain. A child describes a house in a distant city, providing specific details about room layouts, hidden features, or people who lived there decades earlier. When investigators check, the details prove accurate, even though the child has no apparent way of knowing them. Most such accounts involve ordinary confusion. Children absorb information from television, books, and overheard conversations, then reconstruct it in ways that feel like memory. Leading questions from eager parents or researchers can implant false memories, but a small percentage of cases resist these explanations. The child provides obscure details that are not matters of public record, that no one in their life could have known. How does this happen? Coincidence can explain some cases. Unconscious cues might account for others. The human brain is remarkably good at finding patterns, sometimes creating connections where none truly exist. Yet the residue of unexplained cases continues to perplex researchers who study memory and child development. Fact 49. Certain wavelengths of a light can trigger seizures in susceptible individuals through mechanisms that remain poorly understood. Photosensitive epilepsy affects a small percentage of people with epilepsy, causing seizures when they are exposed to flickering lights, particular patterns, or specific color combinations. The exact neural mechanisms are unclear. Somehow, rhythmic visual stimulation synchronizes brain activity in abnormal ways, triggering electrical storms that spread across the cortex. Not everyone with epilepsy is photosensitive, and not all flashing lights trigger seizures. The frequency matters, typically in the range of 15 to 25 flashes per second. Certain geometric patterns, especially high contrast stripes, can also provoke responses. This sensitivity has practical implications in our modern world. Video games, television programs, and even architectural designs with repetitive patterns can pose risks. Warning labels and design guidelines now exist to minimize these triggers, but the underlying question remains: why should visual input, normally processed smoothly by the brain, sometimes cascade into uncontrolled electrical activity? Understanding this could illuminate broader questions about how the brain maintains stability, how sensory information is processed, and why neural networks sometimes fall into pathological synchronization. Fact 50. Ancient ice cores contain layers where the usual climate patterns suddenly break down, showing abrupt changes that occurred within single years, rather than the gradual shifts we typically expect. When scientists drill deep into glaciers and ice sheets, they retrieve cylinders of ice representing thousands of years of accumulated snowfall. Chemical analysis of these cores reveals past temperatures, atmospheric composition, and environmental conditions preserved in frozen layers. Usually changes occur gradually over centuries or millennia, but certain layers show dramatic shifts, happening almost overnight in geological terms. Temperatures might spike or plummet. Atmospheric dust concentrations might surge. Ocean circulation patterns might reverse. These rapid changes suggest that Earth's climate system can flip between states much faster than once believed. What triggers these sudden transitions? Do they represent tipping points where gradual pressures accumulate until something gives way catastrophically? Could feedbacks amplify small changes into massive systemic shifts? Understanding these ancient rapid changes is crucial, because our own civilization may be pushing climate systems towards similar thresholds. Ice cores warn us that stability is not guaranteed, that the climate can jump from one state to another with shocking speed when the wrong buttons are pushed. Fact 51. Certain metals remember their original shape after being bent or twisted, springing back to their initial form when heated, and the atomic mechanisms behind this shape memory effect remain incompletely understood. Imagine bending a paperclip into a new configuration, then watching it spontaneously return to its original form when you warm it slightly. Special alloys like nitinol, a combination of nickel and titanium, behave exactly this way. Engineers use these materials in medical devices, eyeglass frames, and spacecraft components. At the atomic level, the metal's crystal structure can exist in different arrangements. Cooling allows it to shift into a flexible phase that can be deformed. Heating triggers a transformation back to its original crystalline arrangement, forcing the metal to resume its previous shape. But many details puzzle material scientists. Why do certain atomic ratios produce this effect while slight variations do not? How many cycles can a material complete before the memory degrades? Can we design new alloys with even more dramatic transformation capabilities? Shape memory metals blur the line between passive materials and active systems, behaving almost as if they possess intention, remembering and returning to a preferred state like living tissue healing a wound. Fact 52. Lightning scars on human skin sometimes form intricate branching patterns called Lichtenberg figures, and the exact process that creates these temporary tattoos is not fully explained. When lightning strikes a person and they survive, strange marks occasionally appear on their skin, resembling ferns or tree branches spreading across their body in reddish or pink patterns. These designs, named after the physicist who first studied similar electrical discharge patterns, can persist for hours or days before fading. Scientists believe they result from ruptured blood vessels following the electrical current's path through tissue, but the remarkable beauty and consistency of the patterns raises questions. Why do they branch so regularly? Do blood vessels guide the current, or does the current's path determine which vessels rupture? Similar patterns appear when high-voltage electricity passes through certain materials, suggesting universal principles govern how electrical energy distributes itself. Yet translating laboratory observations to the chaotic reality of a lightning strike, where massive current flows through irregular human anatomy in milliseconds, leaves room for uncertainty. These figures are reminders that even devastating events can create unexpected beauty, that physics operates according to aesthetic principles we barely recognize. Fact 53. Babies seem to possess innate knowledge of basic physics, reacting with surprise when objects behave in impossible ways, suggesting learning begins far earlier than we assumed. Researchers show infants events that violate physical laws, like a ball appearing to pass through a solid wall or an object hovering in midair without support. Even babies only a few months old stare longer at these impossible scenarios than at normal ones, indicating they recognize something is wrong. This suggests that human brains come preloaded with expectations about how the world works, foundations upon which later learning builds. But where does this early knowledge originate? Is it hardwired through evolution, with generations of experience shaping neural circuits that anticipate gravity, solidity, and continuity? Or do babies learn these principles extremely rapidly through observation in their first weeks of life? The debate touches fundamental questions about nature versus nurture. If basic physics understanding is innate, what other knowledge might humans possess from birth? What invisible scaffolding supports the construction of everything we later learn? Fact 54. Rivers sometimes flow uphill when tides push seawater inland with enough force to reverse the current, creating temporary reversals that seem to defy gravity. Most rivers obey gravity's pull, flowing downhill from mountains and lakes toward the sea. But in certain coastal regions with strong tides, something strange happens twice daily. As the tide rises, seawater pushes into river mouths with such power that it overcomes the river's flow, forcing fresh water backward upstream. The river appears to flow uphill, water moving against gravity's command. This tidal bore can travel many kilometers inland, creating waves that surfers sometimes ride. The phenomenon reveals how multiple forces compete in nature. Gravity pulls the river seaward. Tidal forces driven by the moon's gravitational pull on Earth's oceans push in the opposite direction. When tides are strong enough, they win temporarily, demonstrating that gravity's dominance is not absolute. These reversals affect ecosystems, mixing salt water with fresh, carrying nutrients and sediment in unexpected directions, creating habitats that exist nowhere else. Rivers flowing backward remind us that nature's rules are more flexible than our simplified mental model suggest. Fact 55. Certain individuals never forget anything they experience, remembering every day of their lives in perfect detail, and this condition, called hyperthymesia, remains neurologically mysterious. Imagine recalling with complete clarity what you ate for breakfast on a random Tuesday 15 years ago, what clothes you wore, what the weather was like, what conversations you had. For people with hyperthymesia, this total recall is automatic and constant. They cannot choose what to remember or forget. Every experience becomes permanently accessible, creating an internal archive that most people cannot imagine. Brain scans show some differences in structure, particularly in regions associated with autobiographical memory, but no single factor explains the condition. Is hyperthymesia a gift or burden? Those who possess it report both benefits and struggles. They can recall joyful moments with perfect fidelity, but painful memories remain equally vivid, never softening with time. They cannot forget embarrassments, losses, or trauma. The condition challenges assumptions about memory's purpose. Perhaps forgetting is not a flaw but a necessary function, allowing brains to prioritize important information while discarding trivia. Hyperthymesia reveals that our normal forgetfulness might be a feature rather than a bug. Fact 56. Spacecraft visiting certain regions of the solar system experience unexplained changes in velocity, small accelerations that do not match predictions from known forces. When engineers track probes flying past planets or through deep space, they calculate trajectories using equations that account for gravity, solar radiation pressure, and other understood forces. But several missions have detected tiny anomalies, velocity changes measured in fractions of a millimeter per second that should not exist. The most famous example is the Pioneer anomaly, where twin spacecraft gradually slowed more than expected as they left the solar system. After years of investigation, scientists concluded that subtle thermal radiation from the probes themselves created a tiny rocket effect. But other anomalies remained. Some flybys produce velocity shifts that resist easy explanation. Could they indicate errors in our gravitational models? Might unknown forces operate at particular distances from the Sun? Or do spacecraft themselves behave in ways we have not fully characterized? Space agencies continue monitoring, measuring positions with extreme precision, searching for patterns that might reveal new physics, or simply better understanding of engineering details. The solar system might still hold surprises even in the emptiness between worlds. Fact 57. Certain paintings contain hidden images visible only under specific lighting conditions, and art historians debate whether these were intentional secrets or accidental byproducts of painting techniques. Museums using ultraviolet light, infrared cameras, or X-ray imaging sometimes discover that famous paintings hide additional layers. A portrait might conceal an earlier composition underneath. A landscape might contain figures painted over by the artist. Religious works sometimes reveal symbols invisible under normal light. In many cases, these hidden elements result from artists reusing expensive canvases, painting new works over abandoned ones. But occasionally, the hidden imagery seems deliberately concealed, perhaps encoded messages, private jokes, or images too controversial to display openly. Technology allows us to peer beneath the surface, revealing palimpsests where multiple artworks occupy the same physical space. This raises questions about artistic intention. Did painters expect future generations to discover these secrets? Were they hiding knowledge meant only for certain viewers? Or have we stumbled upon layers never intended for any eyes? Each revelation rewrites our understanding of familiar masterpieces, suggesting that even well-studied artworks may harbour mysteries. Fact 58. Deserts sometimes bloom with millions of flowers following rare rainstorms, transforming barren landscapes overnight, and the triggering mechanisms allowing dormant seeds to time their germination so precisely puzzle botanists. Desert seeds can lie buried for years, waiting. Most rainstorms are insufficient, bringing just enough moisture to germinate a seed but not enough to sustain growth, which would waste the opportunity. Somehow, seeds can distinguish between false alarms and genuine conditions that will support their entire life cycle. When the right combination of rainfall, temperature, and timing occurs, millions of seeds respond simultaneously, carpeting vast areas with blooms. How do they know? Chemical signals in the soil might indicate moisture levels. Temperature sensors in seed coats might assess seasonal timing. Perhaps multiple conditions must align, creating a biological lock that opens only when all keys turn simultaneously. The result is spectacular. Brief explosions of colour in landscapes typically defined by browns and greys. These superbloom events feed insects, birds, and other desert inhabitants, concentrating an entire year's reproduction into a few weeks. Then the flowers set seed, completing their cycle before drought returns, leaving the desert empty again, waiting for rain that might not come for another decade. Fact 59. Airline passengers sometimes report seeing bright flashes of light at high altitudes that are not lightning or airplane equipment, and atmospheric scientists have only recently begun documenting these mysterious phenomena. Pilots flying above thunderstorms occasionally witness strange electrical displays shooting upward from storm tops into the upper atmosphere. These events, given whimsical names like sprites, elves, and blue jets, occur too quickly for the unaided eye to catch easily, lasting mere milliseconds. They were long considered myths until high-speed cameras confirmed their existence. Sprites appear as red tendrils reaching toward space. Blue jets shoot upward in narrow cones, Elves spread as expanding rings of light. Each type occurs in different atmospheric layers under different conditions. Scientists believe they result from electrical discharges associated with lightning, but occurring in the thin air above storms rather than within clouds or reaching ground, the mechanisms driving these high altitude. Electrical phenomena remain subjects of active research. Do they affect atmospheric chemistry? Could they play roles in climate or weather patterns? We have watched storms from below throughout history, but only recently began observing what happens above them, discovering an entirely new category of electrical events. Fact 60. Identical twins raised apart sometimes develop the same unusual habits, preferences, or even marry spouses with the same names, and psychologists cannot fully account for these eerie similarities. Studies tracking twins separated at birth and reunited as adults have documented astonishing parallels. Twins might independently name their dogs the same unusual name. They might work in the same obscure profession despite growing up in different countries. They might share peculiar habits, like flushing toilets before using them or reading magazines backwards. Skeptics argue that coincidence explains most similarities, that humans naturally seek patterns and inflate modest resemblances into shocking parallels. With thousands of life details to compare, some matches are statistically inevitable. But the specific nature of certain similarities gives researchers pause. Genetics clearly influences broad traits like intelligence and temperament. Can it also shape minute preferences and behaviours in ways we do not yet understand? Or do these cases reveal how limited human variation truly is, showing that given similar genetic starting points, people naturally gravitate towards similar choices regardless of environment? Twin studies remain among the most powerful tools for dissecting nature from nurture, yet they continue generating mysteries alongside insights. Fact 61. Some mathematical problems can be proven impossible to solve, yet we cannot always determine in advance which problems fall into this category. Mathematicians seek proofs, definitive demonstrations that statements are true or false. But in the 1930s, Kurt Gödel demonstrated that within any logical system, complex enough to describe arithmetic, some true statements cannot be proven using that system's rules. This incompleteness theorem shattered assumptions about mathematics' certainty. It means questions exist that are true but unprovable, puzzles that will forever resist solution not because we lack cleverness, but because proof itself is impossible within our logical framework. Even more unsettling, we often cannot tell in advance whether a particular problem is solvable or not. Mathematicians might spend careers attempting to prove something, never knowing if they are pursuing an achievable goal or chasing an impossible dream. This revelation changed how mathematicians view their field. Mathematics is not a finished edifice waiting to be discovered, but an infinite landscape containing regions forever beyond reach. Some mysteries are not merely unsolved, but unsolvable, a profound limit on knowledge itself. Fact 62. Certain frequencies of electromagnetic radiation can affect human mood and cognition without people realizing they are being exposed, and the boundaries between safe and harmful exposure remain debated. Humans evolved surrounded by natural electromagnetic fields from Earth's magnetism and solar radiation. Modern life adds artificial sources, power lines, radio towers, Wi-Fi routers, cell phones. Most scientists agree that high-intensity exposure to certain frequencies can cause heating and tissue damage, but debate intensifies around low-level chronic exposure. Some studies suggest that particular frequencies might influence sleep patterns, mood, or concentration. Others find no effects. Complicating matters, some individuals report electromagnetic hypersensitivity, claiming they can feel Wi-Fi signals or power line emissions causing headaches, fatigue, or anxiety. Controlled studies generally fail to confirm these sensitivities, suggesting psychological rather than physical causes. Yet the lack of clear mechanisms does not prove absence of effects. Perhaps subtle influences exist that current methodologies cannot measure, or perhaps our bodies are more resilient to these exposures than feared. As wireless technology proliferates, understanding the long-term biological effects becomes increasingly important. We are running a global experiment on ourselves, and the results will take decades to fully interpret. Fact 63. Ancient batteries consisting of clay jars, copper and iron date back over 2,000 years, yet archaeologists debate their actual purpose and whether they genuinely produced electricity. Discovered in Iraq, these artifacts contain all the components necessary for a primitive battery. Fill the jar with acidic liquid like vinegar, and the metal electrodes should generate a small electric current. But why would ancient people need electricity? Some researchers propose they were used for electroplating, coating objects with thin metal layers. Others suggest religious purposes, creating tingling sensations that priests might interpret as divine presence. Skeptics argue they were simply storage containers, and their battery-like construction is coincidental. The debate reveals how difficult it is to understand ancient technology. We find objects and must reverse engineer their purposes based on fragmentary evidence. Modern assumptions can mislead. Perhaps these jars served functions we cannot imagine, because they fit into a lost cultural context. Or perhaps they genuinely produced electricity for applications that left no other archaeological trace. Each discovery reminds us how much of the past remains opaque, how our ancestors' ingenuity might have extended into domains we assume belonged only to recent centuries. Fact 64. Caves in certain regions emit strange lights that float through passages and chambers, witnessed by numerous explorers but never satisfactorily explained. Descriptions vary: glowing orbs drifting through darkness, flickering lights that appear and vanish, luminous, mists that seem to move with purpose. Most cave lights result from mundane causes. Bioluminescent organisms glow in some caves. Decaying organic matter can phosphoresce. Flashlight reflections off minerals or water create illusions. But a residue of reports resist these explanations. Witnesses describe lights in deep caves without biological activity, in dry passages where no reflective surfaces exist, lights that persist for minutes while moving in ways that seem deliberate. Could unknown geological processes generate luminescence? Might piezoelectric effects from shifting rock produce electrical discharges? Some researchers speculate about exotic phenomena like ball lightning forming underground through mechanisms that remain theoretical. Caves preserve conditions unlike the surface world, sealed environments where unusual physics might operate. Until systematic studies capture these lights under controlled conditions, they remain among nature's more elusive mysteries, glimpsed but never fully grasped. Fact 65. The human appendix might serve as a safe house for beneficial gut bacteria, allowing them to survive illnesses that wipe out intestinal populations, but this hypothesis remains controversial. For generations, medical students learned the appendix was vestigial, an evolutionary remnant with no current function. Removing it caused no obvious harm, reinforcing this view. But researchers noticed something curious. The appendix contains dense concentrations of lymphoid tissue, similar to tonsils. It sits at a junction where the small intestine meets the large intestine, positioned to influence gut microbial populations. One hypothesis suggests that when severe diarrhea or infection purges bacteria from the intestines, the appendix acts as a reservoir, sheltering beneficial microbes that can then recolonize the gut. This would explain why the appendix exists and why it contains immune tissue. Critics point out that people without appendixes seem to recover from gastrointestinal illnesses just as well as those with intact appendixes. Perhaps the appendix provides only marginal benefits, noticeable over evolutionary timescales but insignificant for individuals. Or perhaps modern antibiotics and sanitation mask functions that were crucial in ancestral environments. The appendix debate illustrates how even organs inside our own bodies can hide their purposes, their roles subtle enough to evade easy detection. Fact 60x. Certain astronomical objects emit regular pulses with such precision they were initially mistaken for artificial signals from alien civilizations. When radio astronomers in 1967 detected repeating pulses from a point in space, arriving every 1.337 seconds with clockwork regularity, the team briefly considered the possibility they had found evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence. They nicknamed the source LGM-1 for Little Green Men. Further observations revealed the truth: pulsars, rapidly spinning neutron stars sweeping beams of radiation across space like cosmic lighthouses. Each pulse arrives as Earth intersects the beam during the star's rotation. The precision arises from conservation of angular momentum, collapsed stars spinning rapidly maintain their rotation with extraordinary stability. Yet the initial confusion was reasonable. Nature rarely produces such perfect regularity. The discovery of pulsars expanded our understanding of stellar death, showing that massive stars can collapse into objects more extreme than previously imagined. It also demonstrated how easily natural phenomena can mimic artificial signals, a lesson relevant to searches for extraterrestrial intelligence. The universe contains clockwork mechanisms that require no clockmaker, precision without purpose, order emerging from chaos through physics alone. Fact 67. Fog sometimes displays unusual optical properties, creating illusions where distant objects appear to float or distorting perception of size and distance in ways that disorient travellers. Dense fog scatters light in complex ways. Shadows can seem to detach from objects. Light sources create exaggerated halos. Distances become impossible to judge accurately. Mariners and aviators report that fog occasionally produces effects beyond these normal distortions. Phantom vessels appearing in the mist, landforms that seem present but disappear upon approach, or regions where the fog itself glows with internal luminescence. Most explanations involve known optical phenomena. Temperature inversions can create mirages where light bends, projecting images of distant objects into nearby views. Ice crystals in certain fogs produce unusual light scattering. Psychological factors compound physical effects. When disoriented by fog, humans perceive ambiguous stimuli in ways that match expectations or fears. But mariners with decades of experience insist certain fog encounters defy standard explanations. Perhaps rare combinations of atmospheric conditions create optical effects we have not yet catalogued. Or perhaps fog's power lies primarily in stripping away visual context, revealing how dependent our perception is on clear cues, how easily reality becomes uncertain when vision dims. Fact 68. Animals sometimes evacuate areas days before earthquakes strike, displaying behavior that suggests they can sense seismic activity before humans detect it instrumentally. Reports span cultures and centuries, dogs barking frantically, birds abandoning nesting sites, snakes emerging from hibernation in winter, livestock refusing to enter buildings. Before major earthquakes, such observations multiply. Do animals possess early warning systems we lack? Several mechanisms seem plausible. Earthquakes release gases from underground, and animals might smell chemical changes. Subtle ground vibrations precede major shaking, potentially detectable by animals more sensitive to vibration. Electromagnetic changes in Earth's crust might affect animals with magnetic sense organs, or perhaps animals simply notice tiny foreshocks that humans dismiss. Research remains inconclusive. Systematic studies struggle to separate genuine predictive behavior from random animal activity that humans notice only after earthquakes occur, a form of confirmation bias. Controlled experiments are difficult because earthquakes are unpredictable. Still, enough anecdotal evidence exists that some seismologists take the possibility seriously, wondering if animal behavior could complement instrumental monitoring, providing additional early warning for vulnerable populations. Fact 69. The deep sea contains brine pools, underwater lakes of super salty water that do not mix with the surrounding ocean, creating toxic boundaries that kill most creatures attempting to cross. When seawater seeps into salt deposits beneath the seafloor and dissolves them, extremely concentrated brine results. This dense solution sinks into depressions, forming distinct lakes sitting on the ocean bottom, complete with shores, waves, and surfaces you could theoretically dive into from the surrounding seawater. These pools contain 3 to 8 times the salt concentration of normal seawater, creating environments so harsh that most marine life cannot survive. Yet specially adapted bacteria thrive at the boundaries, forming ecosystems based on chemical energy rather than sunlight. Submersibles exploring these pools capture surreal footage. A lake beneath the sea, its surface rippling with internal currents, methane bubbling up from below, dead organisms littering the toxic shores. The discovery of brine pools revealed that Earth's oceans contain hidden pockets of alien chemistry, environments as hostile as any on other planets, yet teeming with life that found ways to exploit conditions that would kill everything else. Fact 70. Certain individuals can voluntarily control body functions usually considered automatic, like heart rate, blood pressure, or immune response, and neuroscience cannot fully explain this level of conscious control. Yogis and meditation practitioners have long claimed abilities to slow their heartbeats, raise their body temperature, or enter states of deep hibernation. Western science initially dismissed these claims as exaggeration, but laboratory studies confirmed that some individuals can indeed exert conscious control over autonomic functions. Wim Hof, a Dutch extreme athlete, demonstrated the ability to suppress immune responses and maintain body temperature in freezing conditions through breathing techniques and mental training. Brain imaging during these feats shows unusual patterns of neural activity, with regions normally controlling voluntary movement seeming to influence systems that operate automatically. How is this possible? The autonomic nervous system is not entirely separate from conscious control. Pathways exist, but most people never learn to use them. Training through biofeedback, meditation, or specific breathing practices might strengthen these connections. What remains mysterious is the upper limit of such control. Could humans learn to consciously direct healing, fight infections, or alter metabolism? These edge cases hint that the boundary between voluntary and involuntary bodily functions might be more permeable than anatomy textbooks suggest. Fact 71. Certain plants close their leaves at night as if sleeping, and while photosynthesis explains why they do not need leaves open in darkness, the actual mechanisms controlling the circadian movement remain incompletely understood. Mimosa plants fold their leaves when touched, but they also fold them each evening and reopen them each morning with remarkable regularity. Many other species display similar nyctinastic movements, adjusting leaf positions based on time of day. Scientists know that plants possess internal circadian clocks, molecular oscillators that keep roughly 24-hour rhythms even in constant conditions. These clocks regulate thousands of genes, affecting growth, metabolism, and responses to environment. But translating a molecular clock into physical leaf movement requires complex machinery. Motor cells at the base of leaves pump water in or out, changing pressure and causing the leaf to tilt. What triggers these cells to respond at the right times? How do plants synchronize their clocks with the actual day-night cycle? Light receptors detect dawn and dusk, resetting the clock daily. But the precision is remarkable, and the evolutionary advantages of leaf movements are not always obvious. Why expend energy folding leaves nightly? Possible benefits include reducing water loss, avoiding frost damage, or decreasing visibility to nocturnal herbivores. Plants live according to rhythms as reliable as any animal's sleep cycle, dancing slowly through each day in ways we barely notice. Fact 72. The Great Blue Hole in Belize is a massive underwater sinkhole containing stalactites that could only have formed above water, proving the cave system once stood on dry land before sea levels rose. This perfectly circular chasm plunges over 100 meters into the seafloor, its dark blue waters visible from space. Divers exploring its depths find a cathedral of stone formations, stalactites hanging from overhangs, just as they would in any surface cave. But stalactites grow only through dripping water in air-filled caves, depositing minerals over thousands of years. Their presence proves this cavern formed during ice ages when ocean levels dropped dramatically, exposing limestone bedrock to erosion. Fresh water carved the cave system, and slow mineral deposits built the formations. Then, roughly 10,000 years ago, glaciers melted, oceans rose, and the sea reclaimed the land. The cave flooded, becoming an underwater museum preserving a snapshot of geological history. Scientists studying cores drilled from the blue hole's walls found evidence of ancient droughts and climate shifts recorded in the cave's layers. The formations themselves are dissolving slowly now, submerged in seawater. Casualties of the same climate changes that once built them. Every dive into the blue hole is a journey through time, descending into a world that existed in an era when Earth's face looked utterly different. Fact 73. The human body produces trace amounts of dimethyl sulfide, the same compound that gives decomposing matter its characteristic smell, and the purpose of this production remains unclear. We associate certain odours with decay, the unmistakable scent of death. Yet living humans naturally emit small quantities of these same compounds through breath, skin, and bodily secretions. Dimethyl sulfide is one such molecule, produced by gut bacteria and cellular metabolism. In tiny concentrations, it is odorless. In larger amounts, it becomes detectable. Why should living bodies generate chemicals associated with decomposition? One possibility is that these compounds are simply metabolic byproducts, unavoidable results of chemical processes that serve other functions. Another idea suggests they might play roles in signaling between gut microbes or influencing immune responses. Some researchers speculate that carnivorous or scavenging animals might detect these compounds, using them to identify potential prey or food sources. Could mosquitoes or other parasites use such chemical signals to locate hosts? The human body is a complex chemical factory, producing thousands of compounds whose purposes we are only beginning to catalogue. Some may be functional, others merely tolerated side effects of necessary processes. Each molecule tells a story about our biology, if only we learn to read it. Fact 74. Lakes sometimes explode, releasing deadly clouds of carbon dioxide that suffocate everything in their path, and predicting when this will happen next remains extremely difficult. In 1986, Lake Nyos in Cameroon suddenly released a massive cloud of carbon dioxide. The invisible gas, heavier than air, flowed down valleys, displacing oxygen and killing over 1,700 people and countless animals as they slept. Scientists investigating afterward discovered that volcanic activity beneath the lake slowly leaks carbon dioxide into the water. Cold, deep water dissolves enormous amounts of this gas, which accumulates over years. Eventually some trigger, perhaps a landslide or temperature change, causes the saturated water to overturn suddenly. The dissolved gas comes out of solution all at once, like opening a shaken bottle of soda, erupting from the lake surface in a deadly fountain. Similar conditions exist at other volcanic lakes worldwide. Engineers installed pipes in Lake Nyos to slowly siphon off dissolved gas, preventing future catastrophes. But many dangerous lakes remain unmonitored. The challenge lies in predicting which lakes pose threats and when they might release their deadly burden. Limnic eruptions are rare enough that we lack experience forecasting them, yet common enough that they remain real dangers for communities living in volcanic regions. Fact 75. Certain sounds can shatter glass or cause avalanches, demonstrating how vibration at the right frequency can destroy seemingly solid structures, and the thresholds between harmless and destructive remain context-dependent. Every object has natural frequencies at which it prefers to vibrate. A wine glass, for instance, resonates at a pitch determined by its size, shape, and thickness. If you produce sound at exactly that frequency with sufficient volume, the glass will begin vibrating more and more vigorously until the molecular bonds holding it together fail and it shatters. This principle, called resonance, governs countless phenomena. Bridges can collapse if wind or marching soldiers create rhythmic forces matching the structure's natural frequency. Avalanches can trigger from sounds if snow sits at the edge of stability, and vibrations provide the final nudge. Buildings during earthquakes suffer most damage when seismic frequencies match their resonant periods. Understanding resonance allows engineers to design structures that avoid these destructive coincidences, but it also reveals a fundamental truth. Everything has frequencies at which it becomes vulnerable. The solid world is not as stable as it appears. The right vibration, even seemingly gentle, can unmake structures that resist much stronger static forces. Reality is vibrational, and everything dances to its own particular tune, waiting for the frequency that will transform or destroy it. Fact 76. Certain bacteria can survive in nuclear reactor cooling pools, thriving in radiation levels that would instantly kill any other known organism, and their protection mechanisms challenge our understanding of biological limits. Inside active nuclear facilities, water surrounding fuel rods glows with Cherenkov radiation, a blue luminescence caused by particles moving faster than light travels through water. The radiation here is lethal, destroying DNA and shredding cellular machinery. Yet scientists discovered bacteria swimming happily in these pools, apparently unharmed. These extremophiles possess extraordinary DNA repair systems, fixing damage almost as quickly as radiation causes it. They also produce protective compounds that neutralize harmful molecules created by radiation. What makes this ability so puzzling is its origin. Nuclear reactors are recent human inventions, so these bacteria could not have evolved their resistance in response to such environments. Instead, they must have developed these capabilities for other reasons, perhaps to survive other extreme conditions like desiccation or chemical stress, and coincidentally found themselves equipped to handle radiation. Studying these microbes could revolutionize medicine, offering insights into DNA repair that might help treat cancer or radiation sickness. They also suggest that life might persist in environments we consider absolutely sterile, raising possibilities for survival in harsh alien worlds. Fact 77. Some individuals experience synesthesia where numbers and letters possess distinct personalities and genders, creating rich mental landscapes that influence mathematics and language processing. While most synesthesia involves crossed sensory perceptions, a rarer form called ordinal linguistic personification assigns human characteristics to symbols. The number 7 might feel proud and aloof. The letter M might seem maternal and warm. These are not metaphors or conscious associations, but automatic, lifelong perceptions. People with this condition report that their relationships with numbers and letters feel as real as relationships with actual people. Some find mathematics easier because numbers have personalities that guide problem solving. Others struggle because certain combinations feel uncomfortable, like forcing incompatible personalities to interact. Neuroscientists studying this phenomenon find heightened connectivity between brain regions processing symbols and those handling social information. Somehow, neural pathways that normally evaluate human behavior instead activate when viewing abstract characters. This reveals how flexible brain architecture can be, how regions evolved for one purpose can be recruited for entirely different tasks. It also raises questions about whether abstract reasoning and social cognition share deeper connections than we realized, whether understanding numbers and understanding people might use similar mental machinery. Fact 78. Hurricanes occasionally develop double eye walls, one nested inside another, and the complex dynamics governing when this happens and how it affects storm intensity remain incompletely modeled. The eye of a hurricane is typically a single calm circle, surrounded by the most violent winds. But sometimes, observations reveal a second ring of thunderstorms forming outside the original eye wall, creating concentric circles of destruction. This eye wall replacement cycle usually results in the inner wall weakening and dissipating while the outer wall contracts and intensifies. During the transition, overall storm strength may temporarily decrease before increasing again, sometimes reaching even greater ferocity. Forecasters struggle to predict these cycles because the atmospheric physics involved are extraordinarily complex. Why some storms develop this structure while apparently similar ones do not remains unclear. Computer models can simulate the process but cannot reliably forecast when it will occur. For coastal residents, this unpredictability is dangerous. A weakening storm might suddenly strengthen just before landfall due to an eye wall replacement that forecasters fail to anticipate. Hurricanes are among the most studied weather phenomena, yet they continue revealing behaviors that surprise and challenge meteorologists. Each storm is unique, following general patterns while inventing variations that keep every hurricane season filled with uncertainty. Fact 79. Certain caves contain formations that vibrate when struck, producing musical notes as clear as any instrument, and the acoustic properties that create these natural xylophones remain subjects of geological curiosity. In several caverns worldwide, stalactites or stalagmites ring like bells when tapped gently. Ancient peoples noticed this, sometimes leaving evidence they used these formations ceremonially, perhaps as primitive instruments. Each column produces a different pitch depending on its length, thickness, and mineral composition. Some caves contain enough musical stones to play recognizable melodies. Geologists study these formations to understand what makes some sing while others remain silent. Crystalline structure matters. Certain mineral arrangements transmit vibrations more efficiently. Shape and size determine frequency. Dampness affects tone quality. But predicting which formations will make sound based on appearance alone proves difficult. The formations did not grow to be musical. They accumulated layer by layer over thousands of years following chemical and geological processes indifferent to acoustics. Yet somehow, chance occasionally produces structures that ring with extraordinary clarity. These singing stones remind us that beauty emerges not just from biology, but from geology, that Earth itself can create art through purely physical processes spanning unimaginable time. Fact 80. The origins of money as a concept remain debated by anthropologists, with evidence suggesting exchange systems developed independently in different cultures through mechanisms that varied widely. We imagine money arose from barter, people trading goods directly before inventing currency to simplify exchanges. But archaeological evidence paints a more complicated picture. Many ancient societies used gift economies where status and obligation mattered more than balanced exchange. Others employed debt systems tracked through memory or tokens. Still others had currencies for specific purposes, shells for marriage payments, beads for religious offerings, metals for tribute. Money as a universal medium of exchange emerged unevenly across cultures. Some developed sophisticated monetary systems while neighbours continued without currency for centuries. What drove these differences? Population density, trade networks, centralised authority, and cultural values all played roles. But no single path explains how abstract tokens came to represent value. The concept of money requires shared belief, agreement that particular objects hold worth beyond their physical properties. This collective fiction, that coloured paper or digital ledgers can be exchanged for food, shelter, or labour, ranks among humanity's most powerful and mysterious social innovations. Why humans everywhere eventually embraced this abstraction, and how it spread across cultures, remains only partially understood. Fact 81. Whirlpools in the ocean can persist for months, creating spinning masses of water hundreds of kilometres across that transport heat, salt, and nutrients across entire ocean basins. Unlike the brief vortices that form when water drains, oceanic eddies are massive, long-lived structures. They spin off from major currents, drifting slowly across the sea like liquid hurricanes. These whirlpools can be warm core, carrying tropical water toward polar regions, or cold core, moving frigid water equatorward. They influence climate, weather patterns, and marine ecosystems. Ships crossing them experience unusual currents. Marine life congregates at their edges where nutrient-rich water upwells. Satellites track these eddies from space, watching them form, drift, merge, or dissipate over weeks or months. What remains mysterious is why some currents spawn many eddies while others remain smooth. The conditions triggering eddy formation involve complex interactions between current speed, seafloor topography, and atmospheric forcing. Computer models simulate them but cannot perfectly predict their behaviour. Understanding oceanic eddies matters because they redistribute vast amounts of energy and matter. They are the ocean's internal weather system, stirring the seas in ways that affect everything from fish populations to global temperature regulation. The ocean's surface appears calm from shore, but beneath, invisible whirlpools churn endlessly. Fact 82. Human language contains universal patterns that appear across unrelated cultures, suggesting our brains might be hardwired for specific grammatical structures. Linguist Noam Chomsky proposed that humans possess an innate universal grammar, a set of linguistic principles built into our neural architecture. Evidence comes from patterns that recur worldwide despite no contact between cultures. Most languages distinguish subjects from objects. Nearly all have some way to express past, present, and future. Word order patterns cluster into a limited number of types. Children everywhere learn language following similar developmental stages, making similar errors, suggesting they are not simply memorizing but discovering rules. However, critics argue that these similarities might reflect common cognitive constraints rather than specific grammatical programming. Human memory, attention, and social needs might naturally lead to similar linguistic solutions regardless of hardwiring. The debate intensifies because testing it requires comparing languages that evolved completely independently, and Earth has few remaining populations without historical contact. Still, studying diverse languages reveals that beneath surface differences, deep structural similarities exist. Whether these reflect innate grammar, general intelligence, or practical communication needs remains one of linguistics' central mysteries. Language, humanity's most distinctive trait, may contain clues about how our minds are fundamentally organized. Fact 83. Coral reefs sometimes fluoresce in brilliant colors under certain wavelengths of light, creating displays invisible under normal illumination, and the biological purpose of this fluorescence puzzles marine biologists. When divers illuminate reefs with ultraviolet or blue light, corals explode into psychedelic displays, glowing in neon greens, oranges, pinks, and reds. This is not reflection but fluorescence, where organisms absorb one wavelength and emit another. Corals produce fluorescent proteins, molecules that seem to serve no obvious function. One hypothesis suggests fluorescence protects symbiotic algae living inside coral tissue, converting harmful ultraviolet radiation into safer wavelengths. Another proposes it aids photosynthesis by redirecting light into spectral ranges the algae use more efficiently. Still another idea imagines fluorescence attracts specific organisms that benefit the coral, though which organisms and how remain unclear. What deepens the mystery is that fluorescence intensity varies wildly between reefs. Some display spectacular colours, while nearby reefs show almost none, despite seemingly identical conditions. Coral fluorescence only became widely studied recently because most reef observation happened under white light. Now, as researchers explore reefs with special lighting, they discover hidden dimensions to ecosystems we thought we knew. The reefs glow secretly, performing light shows no one sees except with technology to reveal what has always been there: invisible. Fact 84. Certain deserts contain zones where compasses point in wrong directions, and magnetic anomalies create natural laboratories for studying Earth's magnetic field. But the exact causes of these distortions vary unpredictably. Mineral deposits containing iron or magnetite can create local magnetic fields that overwhelm Earth's normal magnetic guidance. Volcanic rocks cooled from lava sometimes lock in magnetic patterns that reflect ancient field orientations, creating frozen memories of magnetism from millions of years past. Lightning strikes can magnetize soil, leaving scars invisible to the eye but powerful enough to deflect compasses. What makes some magnetic anomalies especially puzzling is their intensity and complexity. Zones exist where the field twists in spirals, where magnetic north rotates as you walk in circles, where gradients are so steep that moving a few steps changes the readings dramatically. Geologists map these areas carefully, trying to reconstruct what subsurface structures could produce such effects. Sometimes core samples reveal expected mineral deposits. Other times, the magnetic patterns resist easy explanation, hinting at geological features too deep to sample, or distributions of materials that seem improbable. These anomalies are more than curiosities. They challenge our understanding of how Earth's crust formed, how magnetic materials distribute themselves, and how planetary magnetic fields interact with surface geology. Each anomaly is a puzzle whose solution reveals something about the planet beneath our feet. Fact 85. Some individuals can recognize faces instantly but cannot remember names, while others remember names perfectly but cannot recognize faces, and this dissociation reveals how specialized brain processing truly is. Face recognition involves specific neural regions, particularly the fusiform face area. Damage here causes prosopagnosia, face blindness, where people cannot distinguish even close family members by appearance alone. They rely on voices, clothing, or context instead. Interestingly, the reverse also occurs. Some people excel at remembering names, recalling hundreds of people by name, while struggling to match names to faces when they meet again. Brain imaging shows that remembering faces and remembering names activate largely separate neural networks. Faces engage visual processing regions specialized for recognizing unique configurations. Names involve language areas and different memory systems. What this dissociation reveals is modularity, the idea that brains divide labor into specialized components. This organization is efficient but creates vulnerabilities. Damage to one module leaves others intact, producing people who function normally except for one bizarrely specific deficit. Studying these dissociations helps neuroscientists map how brains work, showing that what feels like unified experience, recognizing someone you know, actually involves multiple independent systems operating in parallel, each contributing different information to consciousness. Fact 86. The human voice can shatter kidney stones without surgery through focused ultrasound waves, demonstrating how sound energy at specific frequencies can destroy solid matter inside the body. Lithotripsy uses shock waves focused on kidney stones, causing them to fracture into pieces small enough to pass naturally. The technique works because stones and surrounding tissue respond differently to acoustic pressure. The stone, being denser and more rigid, absorbs energy at boundaries, creating stress that eventually cracks it. Soft tissue, being flexible and filled with fluid, transmits the waves without damage. What makes this possible is precise engineering. Ultrasound generators create waves that converge at a single point inside the body, concentrating energy only where needed. Outside that focal zone, intensity remains low enough to be harmless. The procedure is non-invasive, requiring no incisions. Patients typically receive it while awake, experiencing only mild discomfort. Yet several questions remain. Why do some stones shatter easily while others resist? How can we predict which patients will respond? Can similar techniques destroy other unwanted materials inside bodies, like tumours or blood clots? Research continues into using focused sound for increasingly sophisticated medical interventions. The idea that we can reach inside bodies and selectively destroy specific structures using nothing but vibration seems almost magical, yet it is routine medicine today. Physics wielded as healing. Fact 87. Forests emit chemicals called volatile organic compounds that create the distinctive smell of woods and may allow trees to communicate stress signals across distances. When you walk through a forest and smell that characteristic earthy, fresh scent, you're detecting complex organic molecules trees release into the air. These compounds serve multiple functions. Some attract pollinators or seed dispersers. Others repel herbivores or inhibit competing plants. Most intriguingly, some appear to function as warning signals. When insects attack a tree, it releases specific volatile compounds. Neighbouring trees detecting these chemicals begin producing defensive compounds before insects reach them, as if warned by chemical alarm. How do plants benefit from warning competitors? One possibility is kin selection. Trees are often related to their neighbours through shared root systems. Another is that a healthy forest benefits all members by maintaining ecosystem stability. What remains mysterious is the specificity of these signals. Trees appear to distinguish between different threats, releasing different chemical profiles for different attackers. How much information can be transmitted through these aerial messages? Can trees recognize individual neighbours? Do they respond more strongly to signals from certain others? Research into plant communication is revealing that forests are far more interactive and cooperative than we imagined. Ecosystems where chemical conversations flow constantly through the air, invisible dialogues shaping survival strategies. Fact 88. Certain stars pulsate in regular rhythms, expanding and contracting like cosmic hearts, and these variable stars serve as distance markers across the universe, despite some mysteries about their internal dynamics. Cepheid variables are stars that brighten and dim in precise cycles, lasting days to months. The period of pulsation relates directly to the star's intrinsic brightness. By measuring how long a cepheid takes to cycle, and comparing its apparent brightness to its true brightness, astronomers calculate its distance. This relationship, discovered by Henrietta Swan Leavitt over a century ago, provided the first reliable method for measuring cosmic distances beyond nearby stars. Cepheids allowed us to realize galaxies exist beyond the Milky Way, fundamentally changing our understanding of the universe's scale. But questions remain about what drives these pulsations. The accepted explanation involves ionization zones in the star's outer layers, regions where helium absorbs and releases radiation in cycles that drive expansion and contraction. However, detailed models do not perfectly match observations. Some Cepheids pulsate in multiple modes simultaneously. Others show irregular variations. A few appear to be binary systems where a companion star influences pulsation. Cepheids remain critical tools for measuring the universe while simultaneously reminding us that even well-understood astronomical objects harbour complications that challenge our models. Fact 89. Caves sometimes preserve ice formations that are thousands of years old, containing climate records and trapped air bubbles that offer windows into ancient atmospheres. Ice caves form in regions where winter cold penetrates deeply into cavern systems, and summer heat never fully melts the accumulated ice. Over centuries or millennia, layers build up, preserving yearly records similar to tree rings. Scientists drilling cores from these formations extract information about past temperatures, precipitation, and atmospheric composition. Trapped air bubbles contain ancient atmosphere, allowing direct measurement of greenhouse gas concentrations before human industrial activity. Some ice caves contain ice dating back over 10,000 years, spanning the transition from the last ice age to the current warm period. But these formations face threats. Rising temperatures allow summer heat to penetrate deeper, melting ice that accumulated over millennia. Some ice caves have lost half their volume in recent decades. Others have vanished completely, taking irreplaceable climate archives with them. The race is on to study remaining ice caves before warming erases them. Each cave offers unique information based on its location and conditions, preserving aspects of climate history unavailable elsewhere. Their disappearance represents not just loss of beautiful formations, but destruction of historical records that can never be recreated. Fact 90. Certain insects can walk on water using surface tension, but the physics allowing this varies between species in ways that suggest multiple, independent evolutionary solutions. Water striders distribute their weight across long legs tipped with hydrophobic hairs. The hairs trap air, preventing water from wetting the insect's feet and allowing surface tension to support it. But other insects use different strategies. Some water beetles carry air bubbles that provide buoyancy. Tiny insects like springtails use superhydrophobic coatings that repel water so effectively they can survive complete submersion, emerging dry. Each solution involves intricate adaptations. Leg length, hair density, coating chemistry, and behavioral factors all contribute. What fascinates biologists is that these strategies evolved independently in different insect lineages, showing that the challenge of exploiting the air-water interface has been solved in nature multiple times. Studying these adaptations inspires engineering applications. Researchers develop superhydrophobic materials mimicking insect coatings, creating self-cleaning surfaces or fabrics that repel water. The insects that skate across pond surfaces without sinking are not just curiosities but living demonstrations of physics principles, natural experiments in hydrodynamics that evolution ran millions of years before humans understood the relevant equations. Fact 91. The deep ocean floor contains fields of manganese nodules, potato-sized rocks that grow slowly over millions of years through processes that remain incompletely understood. These nodules litter vast areas of the seafloor, particularly in the Pacific. They form when minerals precipitate from seawater around small nuclei like shark teeth or shell fragments, growing in concentric layers at rates of millimeters per million years. This makes them among the slowest growing objects on Earth. What puzzles geologists is how they remain on the surface instead of being buried by sediment. The ocean floor accumulates deposits constantly, yet nodules sit exposed. Some process must flip or uncover them periodically. Bottom currents might play roles. Burrowing organisms could disturb sediment. Weak seismic activity might shake the seafloor gently enough to rearrange surface materials without destroying nodules. Commercially, nodules interest mining companies because they concentrate valuable metals like copper, nickel, and cobalt. But harvesting them would disrupt ecosystems that developed over millions of years in one of Earth's most stable environments. The nodules themselves represent geological time made tangible, objects that began forming during the age of dinosaurs and continue growing today at rates so slow they seem almost motionless. Geological processes operating at timescales that dwarf human existence. Fact 92. Certain wavelengths of light can trigger migraines in susceptible individuals through mechanisms involving neural hyperexcitability that remain imperfectly understood. Many migraine sufferers report that flickering lights, particular colours, or high contrast patterns can trigger debilitating headaches. Research confirms that the visual cortex in migraine patients shows unusual excitability. Stimulation that merely activates visual processing in healthy brains can trigger spreading waves of neural activity in migraine brains, cascading into full attacks. Why some people develop this sensitivity remains unclear. Genetics plays a strong role. Migraines run in families. Environmental factors, hormones, and stress also contribute. Some researchers believe migraine represents a state where neural networks lack proper inhibition, allowing normal stimuli to produce exaggerated responses. Others think it involves dysfunctional sensory processing where brains misinterpret benign inputs as threatening. What makes the light sensitivity especially interesting is its specificity. Not all bright lights trigger migraines. Certain frequencies and patterns are particularly effective. This suggests the mechanism involves specific neural circuits that respond to particular visual features. Understanding these triggers could lead to better treatments, ways to stabilize overactive neural networks or prevent cascades before they generate pain. Meanwhile, migraine sufferers navigate a world full of potential triggers, lights and patterns that pose no threat to others but can derail their days. Fact 93. These southern lights, or aurora australis, occur simultaneously with northern lights, aurora borealis, because both result from the same solar-wind interactions, yet subtle differences in intensity and colour remain unexplained. When charged particles from the sun strike Earth's magnetic field, they funnel toward the poles where field lines converge. These particles collide with atmospheric molecules, exciting them and causing them to emit light. The colours depend on which molecules are involved and at what altitudes collisions occur. Oxygen produces green and red. Nitrogen contributes blue and purple. Observers in both hemispheres should see mirror images, and generally they do. But occasionally, asymmetries appear. One hemisphere displays brilliant auroras while the other shows weaker activity. Sometimes colour distributions differ. These discrepancies puzzle scientists because the physics should be symmetric. Possible explanations involve differences in atmospheric composition or density at the two poles. Earth's magnetic field is not perfectly symmetrical. It wobbles and has anomalies that might channel particles differently. Solar wind itself varies in density and velocity, possibly striking the two poles at slightly different angles or intensities. Auroras remind us that Earth is not isolated but constantly bathed in streams of particles from the sun, that our magnetic cocoon shivers and glows under this cosmic wind, producing light shows at both ends of the planet in a dance that is almost, but not quite, perfectly synchronized. Fact 94. Certain lakes never freeze despite being in Arctic climates, remaining liquid year-round through geological heat sources or unusual chemistry that depresses freezing points. Most Arctic lakes freeze solid in winter, but scattered exceptions exist, mysterious bodies of water that stay liquid even when surrounding air temperatures plunge far below freezing. Some sit atop geothermal hotspots where volcanic heat warms water from below. Others contain such high concentrations of dissolved minerals that their freezing points drop dramatically, requiring temperatures far colder than freshwater needs to solidify. Still others occupy unique topographic positions where circulating currents prevent ice from forming. These unfrozen lakes create oases of liquid water in frozen landscapes, attracting wildlife and supporting ecosystems that would otherwise disappear during polar winters. They also pose scientific interest as analogues for conditions on other worlds. Jupiter's moon, Europa, and Saturn's moon, Enceladus, both hide oceans beneath ice. Understanding how liquid water persists in frozen environments helps us comprehend those distant seas. Arctic researchers study these exceptional lakes, sometimes establishing year-round stations to monitor water chemistry, temperature, and biology. Each lake is unique, a product of its particular combination of geology, chemistry, and location. They remind us that even in regions dominated by ice, exceptions exist. Pockets of liquid persistence where conditions conspire to resist winter's grip. Fact 95. Human pupils dilate not just in response to light, but also to emotional arousal, cognitive effort, and even when viewing images we find beautiful, revealing unconscious processes through involuntary responses. Pupil size changes constantly, adjusting to optimize vision as lighting varies. But pupils also respond to internal states. When solving difficult problems, pupils expand, reflecting the mental effort involved. When viewing something attractive, whether art, landscapes, or attractive faces, pupils dilate slightly. Fear, excitement, surprise, all produce measurable pupil responses. This happens automatically, beyond conscious control. Researchers use pupillometry to study cognition and emotion, measuring pupil size as an index of mental workload or emotional engagement. The technique works because pupil control involves brain regions linked to arousal and attention. When the brain is more active or engaged, the autonomic nervous system adjusts pupil size even when lighting remains constant. What makes this especially useful is that pupils cannot lie. People can control their facial expressions or words, but pupil responses reveal genuine reactions. This has applications in psychology, marketing, and human-computer interaction, wherever understanding genuine responses matters. The pupils are windows not just because we see through them, but because they unconsciously broadcast our internal states, betraying focus, interest, or emotion through changes so subtle we rarely notice them ourselves. Fact 96. Certain species of jellyfish can regenerate from tiny fragments, with each piece potentially growing into a complete new organism, demonstrating regenerative abilities that exceed almost every other animal. Cut a jellyfish into pieces, and under the right conditions, multiple new jellyfish may develop. This is not merely healing a wound, but true regeneration, recreating entire body plans from partial tissues. The mechanisms involve dedifferentiation, where specialized cells revert to more flexible stem-like states and then redevelop into whatever structures the fragment needs. What makes jellyfish particularly remarkable is that they lack the complex organ systems of higher animals. They have no brain, no centralized nervous system, no heart. Their simplicity may explain their regenerative prowess. There is less complexity to recreate. But this raises questions about the relationship between complexity and regenerative ability. As organisms evolved more sophisticated structures, did they sacrifice regenerative capacity? Are the two capabilities fundamentally incompatible? Studying jellyfish regeneration offers clues about how to potentially reawaken dormant regenerative programs in animals, including humans, that lost these abilities during evolution. The genetic toolkits exist. The challenge is understanding why they remain inactive and whether they can be safely reactivated. Jellyfish, ancient and simple, may hold keys to medical revolutions, their primitive biology preserving abilities more complex creatures abandoned. Fact 97. Mountains sometimes produce strange rumbling sounds when no earthquakes or avalanches are occurring, and these mysterious noises have been reported for centuries without satisfactory explanation. Local populations living near certain peaks describe low-frequency booming or humming emanating from the mountains during calm weather. The sounds can last minutes, sometimes repeating over days before ceasing. Early theories blamed supernatural causes. Modern explanations point to several possibilities. Underground water flow might create acoustic resonance in rock cavities. Temperature changes could cause rock expansion and contraction, generating stress that releases as sound. Shifting glaciers or ice fields, even movements too small to be visible, might produce vibrations. Wind interacting with particular topographic features could generate infrasound, low-frequency waves below normal hearing range that some people perceive as pressure or rumbling. But no single explanation accounts for all reported cases. Some mysterious mountain sounds occur in regions with no glaciers, no obvious cavities, and no unusual wind patterns. Recording equipment sometimes captures these sounds, confirming they are real physical phenomena, but determining their exact sources proves difficult. Mountains are vast, and sound within them can travel through rock for long distances before emerging, making it nearly impossible to pinpoint origins. These geological voices remain among nature's more elusive mysteries, ancient whispers from the stone hearts of peaks. Fact 98. The gut contains more neurons than the spinal cord, forming what scientists call the enteric nervous system, and this second brain operates semi-independently in ways we are only beginning to understand. Your digestive system contains roughly 500 million neurons embedded in its walls, forming complex networks that control gut motility, enzyme secretion, and blood flow. This enteric nervous system can function autonomously, coordinating digestion without input from the brain. In fact, the gut sends far more signals to the brain than the brain sends to the gut, suggesting the digestive system has significant influence over what we think of as mental processes. Research reveals connections between gut health and mood, anxiety, depression, even neurological conditions like Parkinson's disease. The gut produces neurotransmitters including serotonin, often called the happiness molecule, in quantities that dwarf brain production. Gut microbes influence this neurotransmitter production, meaning bacteria living inside us may affect our mental states. This gut-brain axis challenges our assumptions about where thinking and feeling occur. The brain in our skull is not the sole seat of neural processing. Our bellies contain a second, massive neural network that participates in cognition and emotion in ways we have barely begun to map. The enteric nervous system is a hidden partner in consciousness, a neural empire in the dark processing information and influencing decisions without our awareness. Fact 99. The boundary layer where fresh water meets salt water in estuaries creates an invisible barrier that some fish can sense and use for navigation, detecting gradients in salinity through specialized sensory organs. Where rivers flow into oceans, fresh and salt water mix gradually rather than instantly, creating zones where salinity transitions over distances. These haloclines act as liquid fences. Some fish spend entire lives within these transitional zones, exploiting unique conditions. Others use them as navigational landmarks, recognizing particular salinity profiles as signposts. How fish detect these boundaries involves multiple sensory systems. Taste receptors detect chemical differences. Specialized cells sense osmotic pressure changes. Some species may even detect electrical conductivity variations, as saltwater conducts electricity better than fresh. What makes this remarkable is the precision. Fish can discriminate salinity differences of less than 1 part per thousand, detecting boundaries invisible to human senses without instruments. This ability proves crucial for species that migrate between fresh and salt water, like salmon swimming upstream to spawn. They navigate using multiple cues, but salinity gradients provide important information about their position between river and sea. Estuaries are among Earth's most productive ecosystems, nurseries for countless species. The invisible boundaries within them structure entire communities, creating niches and pathways that shape which organisms live where, all determined by gradients we cannot directly perceive. Fact 100. Scientific theories themselves may be temporary, working models that approximate truth without ever reaching it completely. And whether ultimate scientific truth exists or remains forever beyond our grasp is philosophy's gift to science. Every theory in science is provisional, subject to revision or replacement when better evidence emerges. Newtonian physics worked brilliantly for centuries before Einstein revealed its limits. Quantum mechanics and relativity both work spectacularly well, yet contradict each other under extreme conditions, suggesting both are approximations awaiting a deeper theory. This raises a profound question. Does reality have a true fundamental description we can eventually discover? Or are we forever limited to creating models that work within certain domains, but never capture the complete picture? Some philosophers argue that science asymptotically approaches truth, getting closer with each iteration without ever quite arriving. Others suggest that truth itself may be observer-dependent, that reality has no single description, because observers with different perspectives necessarily construct different models. Still others believe ultimate truth exists but remains inherently inaccessible to finite minds, that the universe contains more complexity than any intelligence can fully encompass. This mystery is not about a specific phenomenon, but about science itself, about whether the enterprise has a natural endpoint or will expand forever. Each answer generating new questions, each solution revealing deeper mysteries, an endless journey through an infinite landscape of knowledge where the horizon perpetually recedes.